Welcome to Guest of the Year. I'm the host. My name's Mike. Joining us as the setlist curator is writer Nick Paumgarten. Nick has been a staff writer at The New Yorker since 2005. In addition to a comprehensive piece about the Dead's touring years, legacy, and his own personal history with the band, entitled Deadhead, Nick has covered politics, other bands, food, and much more. The Intangibles, his memoir about a beer hockey league, comes out next year from Penguin Press. Welcome, Nick.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
This week's prize pack is provided by 492 Vintage, which is run by former Guest of the Year contestant Barry. The roots of 492 Vintage date back to when Barry was in high school and began collecting concert tees, records, and books. During COVID, Barry realized how much he'd accumulated and began selling his lot tees and various Grateful Dead ephemera on his Etsy store. You can use the link in the bio to browse Barry's dynamic collection. Thanks so much, Barry. Thanks, Nick. And of course, thanks to Mason for curating the prize packs. All right, here's how the game works. We'll play the first part of a Grateful Dead live track, and each contestant will use the messaging system to silently guess which year the performance is from. Contestants, who are all in a video conference together, can message in their guesses at any time during the clip or in the 10 seconds after it concludes. Whoever is furthest from the correct year is eliminated. The last two Deadheads standing will have a best of 3 series to determine a winner. We've got our returning champion Mateo here with us, and we'll meet the rest of the Deadheads in a moment. But first, without further ado, the Grateful Dead.
There was a wealthy merchant in London, he did dwell. He had a beautiful daughter, the truth you I'll tell. Oh, the truth you I'll tell. He had sweetheart of plenty and men of high degree. None but Jack the sailor, her true love ever could be. Oh, her true love ever could be. Now Jack is gone a-sailing with trouble on his mind. He's left his native country and his darling girl behind. Oh, his darling girl behind. Oh, to a tailor shop and rest man's array. On board a vessel to convey yourself away. Oh, convey yourself away.
All right, the guesses are in. It was a Jackaroo at the Cleveland Music Hall on November 20th, 1978. Fun Jackaroo there, Nick. Why'd you choose that one?
It's a bit of a gimmick maybe, but it's such a strange show. This set, it's a second set that begins with the following set list. It's jam, drums, jam, Jackaroo, playing in the band, playing jam, shakedown. And my understanding is that Bob Weir was sick, like he was puking backstage and unable to come on. So they kind of come on and just kind of do this random set, which is not really characteristic of any era. So in a way, it's conceived of as a way to trick you guys. But as I was listening to it just now, I heard elements that would be very much that year, 78, which I'm happy to talk about. But I like hearing you guys talk about why you think that is. I consider some of these shows that are a little different, that have like this one-off feel about them, that are not even era specific, that every couple of years you have it, or every year you have a couple shows that are like, what was this thing? It's different. I call them yellow lobsters. And this is one of my favorite yellow lobsters. It's just a weird mood show. And I know Steve Silberman, the the writer. I know he was there and had his mind blown by this one. And so he and I share an affinity for the show. I was not there. I was 9 years old, but wish I had been.
But then Bob does eventually recover and joins Jerry and the rest of the guys on stage.
Yeah, he comes out and does a plan, and he's singing "It's Summon the Shakedown." And then, actually, this show is also the last time they ever played "If I Had the World to Give." So it's kind of a cool show. 11/20. It's also my son's birthday, but whatever it was, 23 years later.
Well, it was a good Yellow Lobster, but a couple people did get it, including Robert and our returning champion from Madrid, Mateo. Let's meet Robert. He is 51 from Portland, Oregon. Robert, nice pull on 78. How did you figure that out?
It had a little bit of that late 70s bounce to it. And then his voice sounded about right. But really, it was like I was training to hear what the keyboard were doing. And that made me feel that's like where like Keith is falling off the cliff a little bit in those last couple of tours and not really being particularly creative. Not to dig on him, but I mean, they talk about that. That's why they left the band. So that's what made me go for it. So
was he like chasing Jerry there?
Yeah, and just kind of just playing the chords and not really doing the kind of like more delicate fills you get from like the early 70s, especially the 73, 74 stuff where he's just being a jazzy player and like he's just a little bit less inspired or whatever.
Cool observation. Mateo, you are our returning champ. You're 35 out of Madrid. Was Keith a clue for you too?
Yeah, but I didn't hear Keith until the very end. I was straining. It's like, where are the keyboards? Where are the keyboards? Couldn't hear them. And my brain was going early 80s at first, just from the sound of Jerry's voice. But when finally we waited, like your advice, well, I waited, Mike, to type in the year till the end. And I'm glad I did because I could hear Keith at the end there. So Jerry's voice was another clue. But I got to see this one because any show that starts with jam, has jam, playing jam, I gotta hear it.
Great, Mateo, you're one step closer to defending your title. Nice work. Tucker, guess 1979. He's also on in the next round. Tucker is 32. He's from Chicago. What'd you hear there?
It was kind of, hints of Keith and later 70s Keith, because like Robert said, he's a little bit more subdued and kind of just humming along with everyone. But yeah, there was definitely some early on, like, early 80s. No, this is Tiger. This is, but then it's like, the tempo's a little kind of more poppy and not as hot and fast as some of the early 80s stuff. So I played it safe between 78 and 80 and split the difference.
Thought you might have been playing the game there with that 79 guess.
Yeah.
Nice work, Tucker. You're on to the next round. Liz is also on the next round. She's 52 and she's from Ithaca, which means Andrew's odd man out. We'll get to Andrew in a second. But Liz, you guessed 1980. Nice work. What'd you hear there? Why 80? You thought it was Brent?
Yeah, I was listening very hard for the keyboards. And my first guess was 77, actually, because it sounds very much like a show from 77 that I have. But then I just wasn't hearing the keys. And at the very end, for a second, I thought I heard Brent's voice.
Nice work, Liz. So Andrew is 31. He's from New York by way of Chicago. Andrew, you guessed 71. Got a little tripped up there. What'd you hear?
Definitely got a little tripped up there. I felt that Jerry's voice was like almost trying to find it a little bit. And I was listening for Donna. I was listening for Keith, which came in at the end. And then a part of me was like, actually, Jerry's voice sounds really old and tired. And I was like, maybe this is like 1990 or something. And what was amazing about it was the reason I went with 71 was because the drummers were just so in sync to the point where I thought it was just Billy on the drums. I mean, that's really cool. Props to Mickey and Bill. So, yeah, man, happy to be here. Good luck to everybody else. I'm definitely staying on.
How did you get into the Dead, Andrew?
The first time that I heard the Dead, I was a lot younger. My father showed them to me along with some of the other jazz that he was listening to. The Dead were really some of the only rock that he was listening to and that he really ever listens to. He listens to funk sometimes, but usually it's a lot of jazz. But he saw the Dead, I think it was in '82 at Stanford. And he used to always like talk about that show. And it wasn't until I got to college, and you've mentioned this before, Mike, but journalist disclosure, I know Tucker very well. We went to college together. He pulled me into his room once at our fraternity house, and he was like, first of all, we're hanging out. Second of all, we're listening to this music right now. And he completely like reinvigorated me into the band. He just, it was the only thing that we were listening to throughout most of our college experience at the University of Iowa. And I started a furniture design company a few years ago after college, and we do a lot of things from the furniture to the art world. And Tucker actually asked if we could create a piece that encapsulated the Dead somehow. And we ended up creating a piece for him, which has since led to a partnership with the band, which is crazy. Yeah, man, this is just an entire story about how Tucker basically helped me start listening to the Dead again and why they're one of my favorite bands right now. And the magic of life is just played on since.
So you're in partnership with the band. What does that mean?
So we have a technique where we can embed crosscuts of wood in resin. And when you think of a crosscut of wood, it could be from a branch, it could be several inches or millimeters, and we can stylistically place them. So the piece that Tucker commissioned specifically was the Steely logo, basically made out of wood, where there were little circles that were stenciled, and it was real pieces of wood embedded in resin. And once we commissioned a few more of those after someone had seen them on social media, one of my friends reached out to me who had known someone who had worked with them and Warner Brothers, and they were like, "Do you want me to put you in touch with them? Maybe they'll like your work." And one thing led to another, and it's where we are today, which is very cool. So we're going to be able to officially represent the Grateful Dead through our work and through our art, which we're really excited about. The first furniture design company that they've ever worked with. So it's going to be cool.
The first furniture design company ever? Wow.
That's what I was told. So I don't know. I'm just grateful for it. And more importantly than that, I'm excited to be here. So without them, like none of this would be possible. And to me, it's just really like fucking amazing how a band like the Grateful Dead has created a tradition. Like how many authentic traditions do we have in this country to where we are now all on Zoom and there are literally multiple generations of people talking about and celebrating something that is more than music and art and community. It is all of it together. And that is one of the greatest American traditions. Very cool.
And it's part of your and Nick's occupation even. You know, it's a hobby, it's a passion, and it's part of your livelihood.
Yeah. At this point, I guess I get to say that it is going to be even more than it has been. So we'll see where it goes. It's launching soon, but we're excited about it. So yeah.
Where can people find that?
We'll be able to sell the work on abdbdesigns.com. That's the name of my company. And then we also have a showroom that's going to be representing the work out in the Hamptons, west out east. And it's going to start with the wall hangings that have been commissioned. But if somebody wants something custom, we make to order. We have a lot of skilled makers. We make everything in New Jersey. And yeah, we've been doing it for a long time. So it's something special.
Nick, how did it feel for you? First of all, how'd you get into the Dead? But also, how did it feel for you to go through what Andrew did, where, you know, you're a lifelong Deadhead and then all of a sudden it becomes part of your occupation?
Well, I felt like, I guess this mainly started when I wrote a long piece for the New Yorker. What was it? I can't even remember the year.
2012.
Yeah, so 11 years ago. I've been thinking about it for a while. I've been listening to the archive. It sort of revived my interest in music and deepened my understanding and knowledge of the the immense body of work. And I had gone to see, Dark Star Orchestra a couple times. I'm thinking that this is a thing that's going to hang around. This has really worked its way into the root system of American culture, American musical culture. becoming multi-generational. It was almost like a genre, it was like bebop or something, or Beethoven, like it was going to be played in repertory, and my obsession with the taped record just deepened. I just kept listening, just listening and listening and learning more and more, and just not getting sick of Jerry or any of it. It just becomes more and more interesting the further you got into it, which is not usually what things are like, unless you get obsessed with something. So anyway, I persuade the New Yorker editors to let me write this piece. And I wrote a very long piece that was cut down from 18 or 19,000 words down to like 12,000 words. So the New Yorker magazine ran 12,000 words about the Grateful Dead under the headline Deadhead, with my name under it, which was just kind of a trip. I felt like I was coming out, because I'd been trying to come off as cool, and here I was like, yeah, I'm a Grateful Dead dork. Yeah, but like in the course of reporting it, obviously, I spent time with Lemieux. I went to the vault. I got to spend an afternoon with Betty. I spent some time with Phil, on the day that Levon Helm died. I was with him when he got the call, so it was like, suddenly it was way closer to the flame, than I had been. Like, I was just a teenage prep school idiot who had gone to like hockey arenas to see them play, and had stood outside and tried to get into these shows and collected tapes like everybody else. And suddenly I was, a lot closer to the actual thing. And that was pretty cool. But, as a journalist, you don't want to get co-opted or be too close to anything. And actually I have a good friend who said after that piece came out, he's like, now you should never write anything more about the band ever again. Like, that's it. You've done it. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's the right thing to do. That's totally the right thing to do. And then like, I keep getting sucked into stuff like this because I love it. I love it. And this is the parlor game that I play at home. And I love, I've listened to a bunch of these things, and this way of going about it is fun too. The guest of the year, that particular, like, it's like fine wines, you get to really get the nose for the tannins, and so I like hearing everyone talk about like the keyboards. You've had guys on before on the show, like talking about tuning of the cymbals, or there was that one guy who was on who won a bunch. He was talking about how Jerry got fat and his fatter fingers led to a different tone. I'd never heard that. I've been listening and thinking about Fat Jerry forever and love that tone. And I was like, is that what it is? And it's so I'm not answering your question. I'm just rambling, but it's this is an endeavor that's drawn me back in, and it's fun to be a part of this and be close to the business of carving wood pieces. And here we go.
Love it. That was Todd, the great Todd.
Yeah, Todd.
So when you were in the Grateful Dead vault for this piece, was it hard to balance your reverence for the dead and need to comport yourself like a journalist?
I don't know. I just kind of, my journalistic mode is to be myself. So I'm there poking around. I'm a fan, obviously, but I can keep cool around the tapes. Pretend to be cool. Actually, it was really being in the vault. This is a little aside. It was in this giant Warner Brothers vault, and there was this other section where they had huge shelves full of tapes of Otis Redding, Aretha Franklin, Led Zeppelin, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, stuff that had never been heard, never released. And in some ways, as much of a Deadhead as I am, like, I'd heard most of the stuff in the vault, in the Deadhead vault, because it's all been released, it's all circulated. But I was seeing that other stuff, like those artists don't have the same culture that we have. And so, there's Otis Redding stuff, there's Aretha Franklin stuff. She's recorded, he's recorded. It's never been heard and may never be heard because there's just not a culture of releasing it or circulating it. And that was the stuff that really got me drooling and had me acting less professionally. And they got upset when I put that in the story, and I kind of had to take some of the things out because I was going to get people fired. So.
Oh, shit. Well, Andrew, that's incredible what you're doing and how you incorporated the dead into it. And Tucker, thank you for commissioning Andrew to do that. Nice work.
Easiest thing.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. It's such a fun show. it's something that's so pure and so authentic, and everybody is having so much fun. At least that's what I've heard on every other episode, and it's no different on this one. So good luck, you guys. It's nice to meet you all, and I'm excited to see who wins.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And that's very kind of you. And I feel the same way. Just a bunch of deadheads hanging out. Fun will ensue. I'll put the ABDB design link in the Instagram story on the launch day here so everyone can access it.
Appreciate you, man. That's awesome.
Of course. All right. Robert, Tucker, Mateo, and Liz are on in the next round, and Nick's got another killer song for them. Let's hear it.
I know you are gonna miss me when I'm gone. I know you are gonna miss me when I'm gone. Gonna miss your baby from rolling in your arms. Lay down last night, but I could not take my rest. Lay down last night, but I could not take my rest. My mind was wandering like the wild beast in the west.
All right, the guesses are in. It was I Know You Rider at Meadowlands Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey on November 10th, 1985. Nice pick, Nick. Talk a little about that one.
Well, yeah, I have to say up front, it's really, nothing I pick is necessarily a favorite or the best ever or anything. I guess I'm picking some of these things for personal reasons. And this is one. I was at this show. I was 16 years old. I didn't have tickets, didn't get tickets. This was my one and only experience as a gate crasher, the cursed gate crasher. I did not initiate this act of violence or mayhem, but being 16 and being ticketless and being in a parking lot in New Jersey, I rode the wave and wound up joining a flow of people crashing in this place where the dreaded security at Brendan Byrne they're infamous, and they wound up killing someone a few years later. But anyway, the karma of that was that later that night I came down with a vicious case of chicken pox and got mugged at gunpoint in right outside of Port Authority. But in between the gate crash and the end of the night, which was horrible, I went to one of my favorite Grateful Dead shows ever, and it's it's in that sort of much maligned mid 80s era, which happens to be one of my favorites, partly because that's when I was introduced to it, also for reasons that I could bore anybody with here for hours. But it was just one of those shows where Jerry was a boss. He was wearing red, Trouble in Red. He was big. I think he cleaned up a little bit for 85, late 85. It was like that was a great tour, fall 85. This is the second set, and they opened. It was a half step rider. I don't think they ever did that again. So this is I Know You Rider out of a half step, which was bizarre. And so I thought, it'd be fun for you guys to hear something, a rider that's disembodied in an era when it almost always would have come out of China Cat. And it takes a while, as a lot of those 80s things do, to warm up. But I think that the second verse and then the solo, to me it sounds like he's playing in paragraphs, and there are elements in there that to me say 1985. So I'm happy to share that. So there you go. It was also the night, speaking of bad vibes, it was also the night that my favorite hockey team's goalie the star goalie Pelle Lindbergh killed himself, drove into an overpass in his Porsche and was killed. So there was like bad vibes in the air, and yet the Dead did something that night inside the building that was special and stays with me always. So sorry to lay that on you, but the light and dark is part of the deal. That's the whole thing.
When life looks like Easy Street, there's danger at your door.
Exactly. Which they played that night.
There you go.
It felt right. I actually had I was running a fever. I felt like hell. We took there was some blotter. It was leopard skins. This was the pattern. Took the leopard skins and then got home at like 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning. Looked in the mirror and I was like spotted like a leopard.
Nick, for a journalist there, you buried the lead. While you were getting mugged, you were on leopard.
Getting mugged. Yeah. It was a hell of a night. And a shout out to my partner that night was a good friend. We played Tweedledum and Tweedledee in the 5th grade play, and I'd like to do a shout out to Tweedledee, who's been hitting some hard times, but here's to Tweedledee. Yeah, a lot of voodoo in the air that night. I'll just say, so
sounds very mid '80s New York from the movies.
Yeah.
That shit doesn't happen anymore, it seems.
It might.
Cool, Nick. Thank you. Okay, so Tucker and Mateo were both closest. They both guessed 1982, and they are both on in the next round. Tucker, what'd you hear there? Why 82?
So definitely Tiger, and it's running hot. The Mac, there's a certain, and when Nick said 85, it was like, oh, spot on. 85, I think, has like his rig, and Tiger, there's something where it's just so tight and so hot. And I was getting a little bit of that, but not the strain of his voice that you usually associate with 85. So I was like, it's in there. And so for whatever reason, 82 felt right. But then when you guys said 85, and then of course the red t-shirt, that's, classic Jerry 85. Yeah, it makes sense. His voice sounded surprisingly, younger and a little bit more kind of upbeat than a typical 85.
Thanks, Tucker. You're on the next round. Mateo, were you thinking the same thing about Jerry's voice at all?
I was, yeah. It sounded like he was a couple, 1,000 cigarettes less than he would have been in 1985. So I heard that, but I also heard Brent, and Brent was singing in his gruff way that he usually does in later years. And so that threw me up. I had a later year typed, and then they started jamming, and the jam was sick. It was really good, a really good clip, Nick. I was feeling it, and it just sounded like an earlier jam. So Jerry's voice, sick jamming. I had to go with 82. There's nothing else I could do.
Very, very reasonable. So Liz is also on in the next round. She guessed 1979 because Robert guessed 1993. So Liz, nice work. You're on the next round. Yeah. So why'd you think 79?
It was Brent's keys. As soon as I typed it in and hit send, I was like, wait, were they even doing I Know You Writer in 79? And I felt like I was definitely going to be eliminated. So that's kind of a trip. Good choice, Nick. I was just mainly going by Brent's keys. I don't know any of the other technical stuff. I can't tell what guitar Jerry's playing or like how fat his fingers are or anything like that. I just, pretty much try to hone in on who's on keys and then what era that sounds like to me, based on who's on keys.
Nice work, Liz. You're on to the next round. Robert, 93, talk to us.
Yeah, I feel like different toys have different sound, and there was something I was hearing in it that reminded me a lot of what you get in late 93, like Jerry a little bit reinvigorated. Jerry sounded old to me, and that's what made me think of that. I mean, when you said 85, I was like, oh God, I love 85. I should have totally gotten that, or at least closer than that. But I think, I just got stuck in, like, it really reminded me that a China Rider from, like, the December 93 tour that just had this incredible energy and Jerry just flying all over everything. And that just got in my head, and I couldn't get past it and hear the details well enough to get out of that previous, the first guest kind of thing, I guess.
Well, Robert, how did you get into the Dead?
Well, I had an older half brother, 15 years older than me in New York. He was old enough to have seen like Hendrix open for the Monkees on one of those rare shows, and he had lots of albums, and I taped American Beauty and Blues for Allah, and I think I stole his Working Men Dead cassette. And the problem is those are all great albums, and so you don't realize that the Dead thing is the live thing. And then I was in college, and somebody's like, "Hey, the Dead are coming to town. You want a ticket?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure." And I called my brother up, and he's like, "Well, don't expect them to play the hit songs, So then I went to the show, and it was a classic case of mind blown. I mean, I spent the whole show probably 30 or 40 feet in front of Jerry, because it was Rich Stadium in Buffalo, and it was every seat is general admission. So you walk in the stadium, and you go wherever the heck you want. And Steve Miller Band was opening. But man, it was just so mind-blowing all the way through. They played Fun to the Devil slow. I was like, oh, cool, they do it slow. I didn't know they'd been doing that for 15 years. But then, after that, I started tape trading, especially after Jerry died. I went to a few shows, and then Jerry died. And so tape trading was kind of the way you could keep the magic alive in the late 90s when there weren't actually shows to go to. And I probably have like 1,000 cassette tapes in the basement of my house that I don't even open because, re-listen, and the online archive is way better quality than most of my cassettes anyway.
But you're still not giving up those tapes.
No, especially because I used to do this thing of I would listen to them, get stoned, and I would make collage art and stuff on the covers. So a lot of them have custom art cases and stuff like that. So, I own my house. It can sit there in the basement until God knows whatever happens. But
Hell yeah, Robert. Thanks so much for coming on, Robert.
Thanks for having me, and I can't believe I got through at least one round. So thank you all.
Liz, Tucker, and Mateo are on to the next round, fighting for 2 spots in the best of 3 series, all trying to vie for that 492 vintage prize pack provided by our good pal Barry, former contestant on Guest of the Year. Nick's got another killer song. Let's hear it. The guesses are in. It was playing in the band at Fox Theater in Atlanta, Georgia on November 30th, 1980. Nick, you requested that portion of the jam specifically. Talk to us.
Well, so that's the it's called the Fox to those of us who love it, and it was sort of one of the first tapes I had, and we had sort of a schoolboy cult around it that has achieved some renown that I've written about, and became a Dave's Picks, and I wrote the liner notes for that, and then every year when Lemieux honors it on that day, November 30th, he often gives me a shout out, which is an incredible thing. But anyway, that's a a tape made by Dr. Bob Wagner, who was a taper and a doctor, and it's by his reckoning the best live tape he ever made. He made it from the balcony at the Fox Theater in Atlanta, and that second set is sort of famous in small circles, probably most of all for a Scarlet Fire that begins the second set, which is Titanic, which to me sounds like a composed piece of music. But the plan jam is a personal favorite of mine. It's like this headlong, kind of aggressive piece of music, better than a lot of sort of post hiatus, meaning post 75 playing in the bands. It's not drifty. It's kind of aggressive and jangly, so why does it sound like that year? I mean, it's probably hard to specify that era, between an 80 or an 82, I know, but there's something about the heavy sound, the heavy tone of Garcia's guitar, the way that Brent is hitting the keys, and just the sound of that theater. I just love it. I urge you all, if you don't know that one, 11:30:80, the Dr. Bob Wagner audience tape, or just listen to Dave's Picks, which is a they made a matrix out of it. And the rule was that when we were kids or high school kids, the rule was there were the 4 commandments, and thou shalt not press play, stop, pause, fast forward, or rewind during the Scarlet Fire and transition. There were rules about having to fire up a bowl every time you listen to it, all this stuff written in like elaborate, calligraphy on a poster board. It's ridiculous. And yet I still I hear that every time I hear it. It just blows my mind. But anyway.
So for Dr. Bob Wagner,